He really spoke with the heart of the issue of the sanctity of life and our responsibility in preserving that and standing up for those who have no voice, the unborn. She's a former director of First Choice Pregnancy Services. She's the director of pro-life activities for the Diocese of Las Vegas. She brought post-abortion ministry, Rachel's Vineyard, here to Las Vegas, where over 500 men, as well as women, have found reconciliation and healing from abortion trauma. You know, a lot of people don't talk about the trauma that comes from having had an abortion, not only for women, but for the men as well. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist with an emphasis, again, on post-abortion trauma, and a founding member and the executive director of Living Grace Homes. And that ministry supplies housing for women that are pregnant and have no place to go. And they do, she'll explain a lot of it, but they not only help these ladies as they're carrying their children, but also even after they give birth to the babies. So we really need to give a wonderful, warm, Four Seasons welcome to Miss Kathleen Miller. Yeah, I'm gonna hand her the mic, and she has a mic. I'll be okay.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I started out my college career planning to be a teacher, and every professor that I had would say, but Kathleen, you're not going to be able to be a teacher because you're too soft-spoken. So he apparently didn't know about microphones.
Yeah, right.
So just a couple of things. Pastor Bill, thank you very much for inviting me, and Stephanie. It's a delight to be here. This is a message that is very dear to my heart. In fact, from 1999 to 2005, I was on KKBB speaking about the choice for life. So an opportunity to once again be able to share that message is always welcome. Just a little bit of my background. I am the third oldest of 10 children, growing up in a good Irish Catholic family. And the abortion issue was not on the horizon very much until I was in high school. At that point, it was being debated. I graduated from high school in 1972, and Roe versus Wade was handed down in January of 1973. Now, when you're 18 and young, you're supposed to be soft-hearted, but and so there was a real conflict over, you know, if this is one of those things where you're being too judgmental, or if you're not being very compassionate, if you don't care about a woman in crisis pregnancy. And so I'm looking around at some of these faces, and a lot of you remember the arguments in favor of legalized abortion. It was supposed to cut down on unwanted pregnancies. It was supposed to eliminate domestic violence. It was going to end women dying from in childbirth, which was a secret that had pretty much ended somewhere in the early 60s. But so it was going to be this panacea that was going to relieve a lot of problems. Most of you also know that that isn't the case, that didn't happen. So my, if you will, come to Jesus moment came about 6 months after my second child was born, because I almost died in that pregnancy and delivery. And my best friend from high school came to live with us, and she was helping me take care of my children because I had a very life-threatening experience and was still weak and recovering. And after she'd been with us about 3 months, she came home she was in college, she came home from school one day and she said, I'm pregnant, but don't worry about it, I've got an abortion scheduled for tomorrow. My response was to say everything that you should never say to a woman in crisis pregnancy. How dare you! I almost died having my baby. How can you possibly think of killing? All that stuff. And she left my house, and I called her mom, and I called every mutual friend that we had, trying to get somebody to reach her to stop her from doing this. And I gotta tell you, up to that point, I kind of waffled. I was like, I don't want to be judgmental, you know, I wouldn't have one, but I'm not gonna But at that point, when it was just right there in front of me, and it was somebody that I loved, I did everything in my power to try and stop her, and I was not successful. I kept calling until I finally reached somebody that said, Kathleen, it's too late, it's already been done. And so I didn't speak to her, not because I wasn't speaking to her, but I didn't hear from her for a year and a half. And I came home one day, and there was didn't have sticky notes at the time, but there was a little note folded up on my mailbox, and it said, and now she's the only person in the world that calls me this, but she said, Kathy, I'm in town for a little bit. If you're speaking to me, call me at this number. And so I called her, and she came over, and we had a long conversation. She told me that she had left the city and had gone upstate, and this is in Iowa, and had ended up pregnant again. And she went and nannied for a family. And for those of you that don't know, statistically, it is very common for when a woman has an abortion or a miscarriage or a child that dies, for them to have what's called a replacement pregnancy. Your body is already in tune and attuned to being able to carry a child, and so it's a physical and a psychological response to the loss of a child is to get pregnant again. So this is what happened to her, and she went up north and she lived with the family, and she placed the child for adoption. And I don't know why, I was 23 at the time, 23, maybe 24, and I really didn't know that much about abortion, but I said to her, well, after you've done it once, why did you decide not to terminate this one? Because it just seemed to make sense to me that once you step into that kind of sin, that it's easier to repeat it. And statistically, that has turned out to be the case. But for her, what she said to me has stuck with me all these years, and she said, at least I gave him a chance.
Right.
She didn't keep up with where he was or anything, but she knew that she had given life to that child. So fast forward to marriage and 3 children of my own and 5 grandchildren. But at 3 children, my husband was transferred here to Las Vegas. And right before I came, I had gone to church at my mom's little church, and there was a pamphlet for Project Rachel. And it told the story about the healing that was needed for women and men who'd had abortions. And it hadn't occurred to me. I've been moving down this pro-life road. I've been reading every piece of material, every book that I could find. I've been moving in that direction. Had gone to life chains and gone and volunteered at Iowans for Life and was moving into that, but mostly just talking about it like within my family. And I got here to Las Vegas, and I started saying to people, has anybody heard of Project Rachel? It's a really good program. Somebody should bring Project Rachel to Las Vegas. It is really a good program. I didn't realize how much damage was done to women and men until I read that little blue brochure. And so at my church and in the pro-life liaison groups and every place that I talked to a group of people, I said, have you heard about Project Rachel? It's a really good program. So finally, I moved here in 94, in about 1998, it became clear to me that God had changed my name to somebody, and it was going to be my job to bring Project Rachel to Las Vegas. So I went and met with the executive director at the Women's Resource Center at the time, and 2 things happened. One was that she gave me her blessing. She allowed me to come to the HEART program, which is Healing and Education in Abortion-Related Trauma, at Women's Resource Center. But they also asked me to do a radio program once a week on KKBD about life issues. This is 1999, and I was absolutely floored and amazed at how much information is out there that you have to dig for. It is not on the front page of your newspaper. It's not on page 2. It's not on page 10. It's not even behind the market reports. You just have to dig for it. You have to go to the library. Unfortunately, the internet started becoming more available right around the time that I went on the radio, and so there was Life News and Life Site News and the USCCB, which is the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, has a pro-life secretariat that has amazing amount of information on it. So I'm going to come back to the Catholics. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. I tried to find the person to give this credit to. I heard this on the radio last year, and I think it's so applicable. Even feuding brothers unite when the barbarians are at the door.
That's right.
So we as Christians must come together in defense of the sanctity of human life. Even though I've been talking about this for 20 years and other people talked about it for 25 years before that, the fact is that the election of this president and the appointment of these Supreme Court justices has put the fear of God into the pro-abortion people, which is why they are passing such extreme pro-abortion legislation, pro-death legislation. And for those of you who are not aware, there is a bill in the current Nevada Assembly. It is SB, Senate bill, because it started in the Senate, 179. And if you are not aware of it, please come up to me afterwards, because I'd like to give you where you can go to chime in on that bill. It is horrendous. It removes any restrictions on abortion. It removes anything that could be considered illegal associated with abortion. And that includes if a woman is pregnant and her baby's father doesn't want her to deliver a child, and he wants to put RU46 or some other abortifacient in her drink without her knowledge and cause the termination of her child, it's not going to be illegal in Nevada if this bill is passed and signed into law. So there's a lot. Your children under the age of 18 are not protected. If they want to get a tattoo, if they need to take aspirin while they're in school, they have to have the written consent of their parents. But if they have somebody that is a coach or a pastor or a priest or that has sex with them and they become pregnant, that person can take them for an abortion, and there's no law that says the parents even have to know that the child is pregnant and has an abortion. So removing parental rights completely. The current bill is enjoined, is not able to be enforced, but the fact is this bill would just negate it. It wouldn't require doctors to perform abortions. So one of the reasons that it was claimed back in the early 70s that we needed to have safe legal abortion was so that people wouldn't do back alley abortions that included wire hangers and different methods. The fact is that in 1963, Planned Parenthood's own literature stated that 90% of abortions were done in doctors' offices by doctors, and the back alley referred to the fact that they came through the back alley door of the doctor's office rather than through the front door reception area. But that was their claim, is we're going to make these safe and legal so that only doctors can do it. And now New York and Virginia and Rhode Island and now Nevada are saying, oh, you don't have to be a doctor to do it. You can be it doesn't specify. It doesn't even say you have to be a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. It just removes the requirement that there be a doctor that performs this invasive surgery that is almost always deadly for one. The reason I say almost always is because you've all heard recently about infants that are born alive that were supposed to be aborted, and it happens. It's the reason that we had partial birth abortion. There are two reasons for that. I said this on the air in the early 2000s. There are two reasons for a partial birth abortion. One is the doctor doesn't want to be embarrassed and deliver a child that was supposed to be dead, alive. Are you okay with this?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Too much for you? Okay. The other is so that they can sell those body organs. And people said, Kathleen, you are an extremist. What is the matter with you? Nobody would sell baby body organs. Does anyone doubt the videos that were done a year and a half ago by the Center for Medical Progress? Does anybody doubt that those are real? Does anybody really think that those were edited so that we would have them saying something that they didn't actually say? Didn't happen. Those are real. So, the other thing I want to talk about is abortion, men, women, and children. Who is affected by abortion? Everyone. In 1642, John Donne wrote the poem, No Man is an Island. I'm not going to do the whole poem, but this line always jumped out at me. Every man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. No man is an island, and therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls, for it tolls for thee. It's funny, I learned that while I was in high school. At the same time, this debate to legalize abortion was raging, and it has always struck me that poem was so indicative. Every child, every human is created in the image and likeness of God, unique and unrepeatable. Each child whose life is ended early at the hand of man is a person who will produce no progeny. A whole line of possibilities are extinguished, not just one child. Back on Friday, I was at a women's tea, and a lady at the table that I had not met before introduced ourselves, and she asked what I did, and I gave her my card and said, I'm the executive director of Living Grace Home. Provide shelter for women 14 to 24 who are pregnant and either homeless or in danger of becoming homeless, often as a result of their pregnancy. So when they say, oh, I've seen the ultrasound, I know that that's a baby, and the person who's responsible for the roof over their head says, yeah, but you can't be pregnant and live here. Living Grace Home is a safe haven from life storms. It is a shelter. And it's so much more than that. But the lady said, I'm so glad that you're doing that. She said, that's amazing ministry. She said, I'm a miracle baby. And I said, that's cool, that's great. She said, yeah, my mom was at Planned Parenthood. She was ready to go in and have an abortion. And they showed her the tools that they were going to use. And she got up and walked out. And she said, I'm 43 and I have 3 kids. And she said, every day I'm grateful. But it's not just my life that was saved there. If she hadn't saved my life, these children wouldn't be here either. Yeah. And their children, and their children, and their children. And so the cost of abortion is immeasurable. The physical, the psychological, the spiritual cost of abortion is immeasurable. Everybody in this room has been touched by abortion, whether you know it or not. Men are affected by abortion in a little bit different ways than women because, don't tell anybody, that men and women are different. Seriously, Time magazine had a front page cover on that in like 1974, so we know that scientifically it's a fact, men and women are different. And so men respond differently to an abortion. If a man is responsible, if he is the one that coerces a woman into an abortion, oftentimes there's a lot of guilt to live with. And so that may result in anger, it may result in isolating, disappearing, just simply not being present emotionally and sometimes physically. I don't know that they've done a count of the numbers, but I know that there's a significant number of men in our prison system that are suffering from post-abortion trauma. And they acted out by getting involved in violent criminal activity. there are also a significant number in the military that, that were involved in abortion one way or another, that ran away, joined the army, so that they could escape having to look that person in the eye on a regular basis. And so it affects men differently. So some men, it's their idea. I'm not ready to be a dad, I'm out of here. And if you have that child, our relationship is over. Well, guess what? If you don't have that child, it's over anyway. Some men actively resist an abortion and will do whatever they can to stop the woman from terminating the life of her child. And so again, there's a lot of anger and regret. I think one of the more difficult ones is the man who finds out after the fact that the woman that he had intended to marry, or maybe just been having fun with, had terminated the life of his child, and it might be the only child that he's ever conceived. The one that is difficult for me is the term wasn't around when I first ran into it, but kind of the metrosexual, the guy that is so compassionate that he says to a woman, it's totally up to you, dear. It's your body. It's your choice. I'll support you in whatever you decide to do. So for all the guys in here, let me tell you what that means to a woman who is pregnant. You're on your own, babe. Nice words, but that's what we as women hear. Any woman argue that that isn't the case? And so men are affected differently, and I really didn't become aware of that until I heard Dr. Kathleen Miller, who did her PhD work on men and abortion in the prison in Wisconsin. So when we talk about aborting a child being a woman's right to choose, a woman does not create a baby on her own. I don't care if you use artificial means to achieve pregnancy, you still didn't do it on your own.
Right.
It takes both the male and the female bodies in order to create a new life. And so you are always, when you choose to terminate that life, you are always leaving one person out. How does it affect women? And I think that this was the study that I referred to at the hearing, and it is the Ferguson study that was done in Christchurch, New Zealand, in about 2004. And at the time, the gentleman that did the study was really annoyed because he was reading research that said that women had emotional and psychological problems as a result of their abortions, that there was increased drug use, there was increased alcoholism, there was increased promiscuity, there was increased self-destructive behavior all the way up to attempted suicide and completed suicides. Suicide among women and men who've had abortions is about 150% higher than the general population. And so those studies were starting to really annoy him because he was pro-choice. And so he decided, he was a research scientist, lived in New Zealand where they have government health care, so he had access to 30 years worth of medical records. So he took this cohort of women and he did the appropriate comparison. He compared women who had, first of all, who had prior mental health issues, and those were eliminated. He took women who had had abortions, and then he took women who had that had no prior mental health issues and carried a child to term. And those are the two groups that he compared, the appropriate groups to make a comparison to. And what he found was that there was an alarming and statistically significant difference in mental health and suicide issues for women who had had abortions. He was flabbergasted. He couldn't believe it. And then reality set in, because when he went to have this study that was well documented, published in both national and international health and mental health things like The Lancet, the American Association of Psychologists and Psychiatrists, nobody would take the study. They refused to even look at it because it negated their confirmation bias. It said, what you all believe isn't true. And so their way of dealing with what you all believe isn't true was, how many of y'all did this or had your kids that do this? Nanny, 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 nanny.
Yep.
And if we don't hear it, then it's not true. If we don't publish it, it's not true. So Ferguson actually had to self-publish that study, and it has been researched, it has been verified. What makes a good research topic or study valid usually is the fact that you can replicate the results of that study. And they have been replicated over and over and over again. So how does abortion affect children? I have a sister who lost a baby at 16 months. He suffocated. And that's been 22 years ago, and the family still suffers. And when young people find out that they have lost a sibling to abortion, they have a similar sense of grief and mourning at the loss of that sibling that they didn't know. And unfortunately, for those moms who don't go through a healing process, for those moms who don't recognize that there's only one unforgivable sin in Scripture and this ain't it, and so go about their lives thinking, I'm already condemned, I'm already doomed, so I might as well live the way I want to live. Their daughters are likely to have a generational effect from that, and so there will be generation after generation after generation of women who terminate their pregnancy or multiple pregnancies because that's just how you deal with a mistake. But for those moms who go through a healing process, it can save the lives of their grandchildren and generations to come. The second year that I went to a Rachel's Vineyard leadership conference, there was a lady there from Alaska, and she was still pretty flaming mad because before she went through the Rachel's Vineyard retreat, and then she felt called to start speaking publicly from the church pulpit and at gatherings of women and men and telling her story. So before she did that, she set her family down because she didn't want this to come as a surprise to them through the back door. So she did that when her daughter was about 12. When her daughter was 17, she became pregnant. And one of the ladies in her church, the same church that she had stood in front of and told her story, went behind her back, and they don't have an abortionist in Alaska. Darn. However, the state of Alaska will pay to fly a woman who wants to have an abortion down to Seattle to go to a doctor there. So this woman went behind the mom's back and signed her daughter up for Medicaid so that she could go down to Seattle to perform an abortion. She got signed up for Medicaid. She got to the airport and she turned around and walked away. And she said, "Mom, after hearing you talk about how much you grieved the loss of that baby and how sorry you were for ending the life of my sibling, I just couldn't do it." So my criteria from a therapeutic standpoint of whether or not you share that kind of information with your children or your parents is, will it help them? There are very few situations where telling your mom or your dad that you had an abortion that they were unaware of when they are Christians and pro-life is going to help them. Very few, if any. But telling your children, telling your sons and daughters that they will carry this loss for the rest of their life. It's not an unforgivable sin. There's only one of those. It's not. And when I tell women that, when I answer the Rachel phone, the first response when I say, there's only one unforgivable sin in Scripture and this is not it, you know what their first response is?
Right.
It's not, oh, what is it? Where can you find that? Can you quote that to me from the Gospels? Although that sometimes does come up at the retreat, and I'm able to say, here you go, go here, and this is where you'll find it. But the fact is that God wants us to come back to Him.
Yes.
He wants us to reject Satan, reject sin, and return to Him. And that's why He tells us, you know, my people will repent and pray and turn away from sin, they'll be restored.
Amen.
I want them to return to me. Two last things, and then I'll be open to any questions you might have. The first is that bill, SB 179. Grab your phones out, put that in your notes, SB 179. It is not a done deal. It is in the assembly. Call your assembly person. Go to the website or the legislature and voice your objection to SB 179. If you don't know what to say, go to Nevada Right to Life, and Melissa Clement has a whole page of bullet points for the objections to SB 179. The other thing is Living Grace Home. Again, when I was asked to take over pro-life work in Las Vegas in 1998, people started coming up to me and saying, Kathleen, what we really need here is a maternity home for pregnant young moms. And my response was, you're right, we do. As soon as somebody decides to do that, you let me know. I'll help however I can. Took about 4 years to, again, figure out that God had changed my name to somebody. Took me 5 years of research and visiting other homes and finding out what is involved in having a home for pregnant moms before we opened our doors in 2007. We have a residential home for those moms during their pregnancy and up to 3 months after their babies are born. And there have been over 450 young women who have spent part of all of their pregnancy at Living Grace. We opened our second home in March of 2014, 7 years later, and that home is for moms who either haven't finished high school, and only 30 to 35% of our moms have finished high school by the time they come to Living Grace, don't have any work experience, and we help them find that, or have an open CPS case that requires supervision. And so the goal is not to take over for parents. The goal is to walk alongside parents if parents are still involved in their lives. But our priorities are twofold. One is if dad's in the picture and is marriage material, we're going to counsel toward and encourage marriage. And since I'm one of the founders, I get to make up definitions, right? Marriage material is if he's not an alcoholic, an addict, abusive, incarcerated, or married to someone else, then he's marriage material. So we worked through those, and if that's not an option, we want them to have all the information that they need to make an informed decision on an adoption plan. Unfortunately, those two combined make up less than 10%, so 90% of the young ladies are going to choose a single parent. So what we want to do is help them gain the tools necessary to do as good a job at that as they can. So our second set of priorities are legal. If they have any outstanding wants and warrants, then we're going to make sure that they get to court, that they follow through on whatever the court requires them to do, so that they're not looking over their shoulder to see if there's somebody that's going to be knocking on the door to take them to jail. Medical. Oftentimes they arrive at Living Grace having had no prenatal care, and they may be very far along. So we partner with Women's Health Associates of Southern Nevada's Henderson office, Dr. Donna Miller and Dr. Carla Turner, and they prioritize the girls from Living Grace. Wiccan welfare. If I could figure out a way to get funded to the point, privately funded to the point where I never had to have these girls apply for government assistance, I'd do it in a minute. However, we're not that well funded.
Right.
We operate 2 homes full-time. Right now, for last year's budget was $400,000, and we worked on a cash budget of $308,000.
Wow.
And Wiccan welfare, school, enrolling in high school, or a job training program, and employment. If we hit all 5 of those benchmarks, then by the time the baby is born and 3 months old, they are going to be prepared to move on into their own independent housing and take care of themselves. So we provide life skills training while they're there. And life skills training is, first of all, we talk about God all the time. We're not affiliated with a particular denomination, but we are founded on the principles found in Matthew 25, where we are called to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and provide shelter to those in need. And as I mentioned to a girl the other day, if you go back and read that verse, it also says, admonish the sinner. So I'm going to be talking to you about that too. But we also have nutrition classes, financial literacy classes, parenting classes that we do in conjunction with the Clark County Parenting Project, and safety classes for the children. So we're trying to provide them with as many tools as we can to help them be successful when they leave Living Grace. So thank you very much for your time. You've been very attentive for my long-windedness. Are there any questions?
What's the difference between the Rachel Project and the Living Grace Home?
Okay, Rachel is for women and men who've had abortions that are seeking primarily psychological and spiritual healing. So it is Rachel's Vineyard is a weekend retreat that is amazing. I've been doing them since 2002, and I always tell the rest of the team that is split up between the spring team and the fall team that I do all of them because I don't want to miss out on the miracles. So,
Okay, now I get it. Okay.
And Living Grace is for moms that want to carry their child to term.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do you have a specific link where we can weigh in on our opinion? Because I just Googled it and I didn't see anything where the public can comment.
On the SB 179.
On SB 179.
Oh, you know what? There is a link. Let me see if I can find it in Melissa's email. There is a page on the. Let's see. Okay. This is long. It's leg.state.nb.us /.
Yeah, I see that,
App.
but I didn't see a place for
Wait a
it.
minute, app, /opinions, /80th, 2019.
80th,
80th, like 80th legislative session.
or number? TH?
And there's a drop down there. After that, it says, under the heading, select a bill and enter your opinion. Go to select a bill and choose SB 179. Yes, once you get onto that site, let me see if I get another. Okay. This site says share your opinion with your legislature, so this one takes you right to it.
Guys, I'll put it on YouTube in the description for the Four Seasons Church so that you can get to it.
Okay.
Great.
Can we put it on the prayer chain? I'm talking to Cheryl.
Oh,
Can we put it on the prayer chain, Cheryl? Because I don't do your.
Pardon?
Could you put it on the prayer chain email?
Yeah, I'll get it from Fran and then send it out.
Perfect.
it's not too late. It's in the assembly. I tell you what, I was told 6 weeks ago that the physician-assisted suicide bill, the SB 165, was a done deal. Don't worry about it. Don't even bother trying to go and testify against it. It's just a done deal. And what happened is that one of the people from the disability community, actually 2 of the ladies from the disability community, was at the legislature in Carson, and they had come to testify about SB 165, the physician-assisted suicide bill, but they also, since they were there, went and testified about one of the education bills that had to do with special needs kids. And when they came out of that hearing, one of the, two of the senators stopped them and said, thank you so much for coming and supporting our bill. And one of the gals said, well, we really weren't here to support this, but we did it because we were here. We were here because we wanted to testify against the assisted suicide bill. And so we'd really like it if you could just make sure that that one just doesn't come to a vote. And one of the senators said, well, that's pretty unlikely since I'm one of the co-sponsors. And I'm telling you, the Holy Spirit's always in charge of these things. Always in charge. Because her response was, really? I had no idea that you were in the pocket of the insurance companies. And the senator goes, what?
Right.
And so after talking to her and explaining how this benefits the insurance companies because it reduces the cost of caring for people who are disabled or mentally ill or have terminal illnesses, she was like, it never came off her desk. It went to the secretary's desk, and I got notice it's there. It might not even come to the floor. And so we were like, for like 48 hours before the time passed where, but that was one of those Holy Spirit things where the person wasn't even there to testify on the first bill, but they did since they were there to testify on the second bill. And they just had the right words, and I always think that those come from the Holy Spirit, had just the right words that this person got one of those flips about what it was that she was really promoting. So.
I heard you say earlier that, I think you said in response to 2 Supreme Court justices being named by the president, that these progressive states are going with these.
That Planned Parenthood, NARAL, which is the National Association of Abortion Related Legislation, and the very pro-abortion states are absolutely terrified that Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh are going to be the deciding factors in overturning Roe. And if they overturn Roe, many people believe that that means that abortion would be illegal across the country. It does not. It does not. All it means is it would go back to the states. Nevada would continue to be a pro-abortion state because it's in our Constitution. It would require a constitutional amendment to remove it because it was a constitutional amendment that put it in to our Constitution. Thank you. Thank you. I need a nap. But yeah, they're just terrified. We oftentimes on the sanctity of life side get accused of being extremist. But if you have ever been a fly on the wall and listened to the people on the pro-abortion side, has anybody in here, I'm going to go with the nods, not seen the movie Unplanned? Oh, go see it. Go see it. It's really a good look at inside Planned Parenthood before Abby Johnson had her conversion experience. And what you'll see there is people that think they're doing the right thing. They have absolutely convinced themselves that they are helping women. And so if you haven't seen it, it's still in some of the theaters. I think it's what's something Village over here? On
Village Square, I think.
Thank you.
Yes.
I can tell I'm an East Sider. But if you haven't seen it, it's worth the price of a ticket. Matinees are $6. Yeah.
I'm pro-life, but what happens in rape and incest? Maybe you don't have a
Hold on 1 second, start again.
I'm a pro-life person, but what happens in rape and incest? Sometimes that needs to be taken care of, don't you agree?
I don't. I'm sorry. Can I explain why? I can give this talk without ever talking about God or the Holy Spirit. Because scientifically, at the moment of conception, that is a separate, unique human being. The DNA is different from the mom or the dad. And if you'll permit me, I actually have, or maybe not, I got permission and then I didn't put it down. Judah Meyer is a woman that was conceived and raped. Her mom was gang raped by 8 men. And then she was placed for adoption. And she was 43 or 44 years old when she found out that she had been conceived and raped. And her initial response was shame and guilt. Why? She didn't do anything wrong. That baby, no matter how it's conceived, whether it is rape, incest, a test tube, is made in the image and likeness of God, unique and unrepeatable. That the criminal did not create that new life. So the baby should not be charged. I was asked this question by a group of junior high in a Bible study. And my example to them was, okay, so your dad walks into the 7-Eleven to rob it. And the clerk resists, and your dad shoots him, but he's caught on camera. And so he's arrested, and he goes to trial. He's convicted, and they hand down the death penalty on you. These high school kids are like, what? No, that's not fair. I didn't do anything. But that's what we do when we say rape and incest. Years ago, George W. Bush was asked that question. He was the first politician that I heard that gave a truly compassionate answer. And his response, we should counsel women who are victims of rape and incest, and we should walk alongside them as they go through this difficult time. Women who have been the victims of rape and incest, who have ended up having abortions, have often said they felt that they were now as guilty as the rapist. So they are traumatized a second time.
I was going to say, 2 wrongs do not make a right. A wrong of rape and incest is not corrected by murdering the baby.
No, it's not. It's not. And there are quite a number of survivors of rape and incest now that are speaking out and saying, why should I get the death penalty?
Yes.
Right.
If you know somebody that's a victim of rape and incest, my goodness, walk alongside them. Help them. Help them get through this. We just had a young lady at Living Grace that was pregnant as a result of a sexual assault. And it's not uncommon in the work that I do there. And she carried the baby to term at Living Grace and placed the child for adoption. And sends me pictures. But during the pregnancy, she would come back to my office and talk. And she said, I know who this person is. And I just don't think, first of all, that I want to have any way for him to be involved in my life or my child's life. But she said, I'm afraid that I would not be able to love this child the way that I should as a mother. And so I'm going to place this child with somebody that will and that can. So there's always other solutions. That is already a baby at the moment of conception. And so identifying whether they should live or die based on how they were conceived is the same as identifying who should live or die based on their zip code. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but the thing is, the fact that it's such a violent crime. I mean, I've seen people that were exposed to such a violent crime.
Yeah.
Some of the women have such a terrible, and knowingly, of course, such a terrible disability reminded of that. That's why, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But, you know, you don't know what to do. I think that the person who does that should be punished.
Absolutely.
And I think our law system's too loose with that.
It absolutely is. It absolutely. There's some states where judges allow a rapist who serves a term after being convicted of rape to have visitation with the child that was conceived. Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And I had a young lady, again, earlier on that was pregnant because of a rape. And she went to the Rape Crisis Center, and that was their first suggestion, is, oh, if it's a case of rape, then Nevada Medicaid will pay for that. She was screaming out of there, because they don't know. But a year before that, she had been pregnant with a man that she'd been involved with for 5 years. And when she got pregnant, her man and her mom took her to an abortion clinic and by force forced her into having an abortion. She had a nervous breakdown, spent 3 months in a mental hospital, and then left the East Coast as a result of it. Got out here and she came out here to help a friend who had a child and was single parenting. And the friend invited some people over for a party. She got a roofie, and next day she knew that she had been violated. And it was another 3 weeks before she knew she was pregnant. And Rape Crisis Center's solution was exactly what she didn't need to hear. Because she had already been traumatized, first by the forced abortion, the mental breakdown. She had trusted this person who had brought people with ill will into her sphere, and now she was pregnant again. So the book that changed my thinking on that was a book that came out almost 20 years ago called Victims and Victors. And it was published through David Reardon's organization in Springfield, Illinois. And it is the only research that I even know to date that has been compiled actually asking women who were victims of rape and incest their opinion on it. And that was the book for me that, because again, that compassion thing, you want to be compassionate, you want to be helpful, you want to have solutions to, as you said, a violent crime, and just a really 9 months of reliving that sometimes. And that was the book that helped me recognize
Can you repeat the
that it
book?
wasn't a solution, it was a fake solution.
Kathleen, can you repeat the book? Victims?
Victims and Victors. Victims and Victors, David Reardon. Yes.
How can we, who may want to help some of these women who are thinking about getting abortion, how can we help to sway them? How can we volunteer? There are three programs in Las Vegas that, actually, I'm sorry, 4, there's a new one. There are 2 pregnancy centers. There's a mobile ultrasound unit, and then there's Living Grace Home. The first 2 residents that we had at Living Grace Home in 2007, one came from Women's Resource Medical Center, and the other one came from First Choice Pregnancy Services. And just like a year and a half ago, this mobile unit came into being. It's called Crossroads. And they go close to high school campuses and malls and so forth, and they offer free ultrasounds to young women. So supporting any of those programs, I will tell you that is one of the things on my agenda, is to ask Pastor Bill to do a baby bottle campaign for Living Grace Home and just collect your funds. And we also have a text to give number that will be on little handouts if you don't carry a lot of pocket change anymore. They always need volunteers at Women's Resource and at First Choice, which Women's Resource is on West Charleston, just over by UMC. First Choice Pregnancy Services is the busiest pregnancy center in the world. And the only reason that I can confidently say that is because there were no pregnancy centers in most of the rest of the world until about 15 years ago. First Choice Pregnancy Services is on the same cul-de-sac as Birth Control Care Center, which at the time that First Choice opened was the busiest abortion provider in Southern Nevada. And between First Choice and prayer warriors that go out there on a regular basis, they put up a wrought iron fence to keep people from getting too close. And I just call it the gates of hell. So, but any one of those organizations, and
They need volunteers, women and men. They need both women and men to volunteer at both of the pregnancy centers. And I'm clear down in Henderson, but if any of y'all come from that end of the universe, we are always in need of assistance. We operate 2 homes 24/7, and we have a staff of 6. I just added a part-time fundraiser because the most important part of my job as the executive director is to keep the lights on and the doors open. And the thing that I'm worst at doing is asking for the money to keep the lights on and the doors open. So my board finally had pity on me and said, okay, we can hire a fundraiser to help do that. So any of those things are a big help. And we have regular prayer groups around the valley that pray at the abortion sites. And in the movie Unplanned, at the end of it, one of the things that Abby Johnson says is that they don't want people to know this, but Planned Parenthood keeps excellent statistics. And they have said that on the days that there are people praying outside of their abortion sites, they have up to a 75% no-show rate. Whoa! Right? If you're out there praying and blessing, 3 out of 4 women turn around and don't go in.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Right.
How many of you have ever prayed in front of an abortion clinic before?
Not enough.
Aubrey has. Aubrey's 11, and she has. Starting young. You see people turn around and leave. Don't sidewalk counsel unless you've been trained to sidewalk counsel. But you don't need extra training to pray. Yeah. And I've had many of my sidewalk counselors over the years had women come back to them with a child and say, because you were here, because you were praying, my child is alive. Yeah, absolutely. So being a prayer warrior, invaluable. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time.
We had just heard from the foremost voice in this valley concerning this topic. And I know when we had the last stand meeting, we had Victor Jakes from the Review Journal as our main speaker. And I asked Kathleen if she could just come and speak 5 minutes, but thank God she was there for questions. And all 3 of us pastors, Pastor David Walker down the street, and Daryl Porter, and I. We all said that what Victor had to share was excellent, but Kathleen Miller has the heart for this issue. And I think we were all greatly, greatly blessed. What I want to do today is, we didn't really plan this, but I want to just take up an offering as we close for Living Grace Homes while we're here. If you have anything you can give, or the other thing is if you didn't come prepared to give anything, just bring in bring your check. You can make it at the Living Grace Homes, or you can make it at the Four Seasons Church and note that it's for Living Grace Homes. Or if you have cash, put it in an envelope, mark it for Living Grace Homes. So let's again give Kathleen a wonderful round of applause.